Rome has a way of making moments feel eternal. The ancient city, where gladiators once fought and empires rose and fell, hosted something far quieter on May 11, 2026, but no less unforgettable. Inside the Foro Italico Media Center, the air smelled like espresso and newsprint. Cameras were pointed at a young woman who had just walked off a clay court after losing to the world number 2, and nobody in that room could have guessed that what was about to happen had nothing to do with tennis at all. Alex had just finished her third-round match at the Italian Open against Elena Rybakina, the reigning Australian Open champion, one of the most ferocious ball strikers in women's tennis. The scoreboard said 6-4, 6-3. A loss on paper. But if you actually watched that match, you saw something different. You saw a 20-year-old from the Philippines pushing a top 5 player to 28 winners. You saw her breaking serve. You saw her refusing to go away, hanging in rallies that should have ended 3 shots earlier, covering the court with a kind of desperate grace that made the Philippine fans in the stands wave their flags even harder. She lost, but she earned something. Respect, yes, but more than that, she earned the right to walk into that press conference with her head high. And that is exactly what she did. She sat down behind the microphone looking calm, looking composed, the kind of quiet exhaustion on her face that you only recognize if you have ever given everything you had to something and come up just short. The journalists were ready with their notebooks and their predictable questions. How did you feel about your performance? What did you learn from playing Rybakina? Are you confident heading into Roland Garros? Alex answered them the way she always does, with honesty, with thoughtfulness, without hiding behind cliches. She talked about her movement on clay improving, about how she could feel the difference from last year, about how the week felt meaningful even without the win. She smiled when someone brought up the Philippine flags filling the Foro Italico, the chants of Laban Alex bouncing off marble statues that had been standing since the Roman Empire. She said she was happy with the week. She said she saw real progress. And then, just as the room started to feel like things were wrapping up, just as journalists started capping their pens and photographers started lowering their cameras, Alex leaned slightly forward into the microphone and said something nobody was prepared for. She said she had an announcement to make. And the room stopped. Not gradually, not slowly, all at once, like someone had pulled a plug. Every pen went still. Every camera snapped back up. Every eye in that media center locked onto a 20-year-old girl from the Philippines who suddenly had the full, undivided attention of an entire press room that had heard thousands of athlete press conferences and thought it had heard everything. What she said next was not about rankings. It was not about tactics or training or tournament scheduling. It was about something so much more personal, so much more vulnerable, that several of the journalists who were there later said they felt like they were intruding on a private moment, like they had accidentally walked into something that was never meant to be public. She told them she had been playing tennis since she was 4 years old. She told them she had been on the road since she was 13. 13 years old, living out of a suitcase, hopping from tournament to tournament, growing up in airports and locker rooms and practice courts while other kids her age were at sleepovers and school dances and birthday parties she was missing. She said she had missed birthdays. She had missed holidays. She had missed moments that she knew she could never get back. And here is the part that hit the room hardest. She said she had been okay with it. She had accepted all of it, the sacrifices, the loneliness, the weight of carrying an entire nation's hope on her shoulders, because she loved tennis. Because every time she stepped on a court, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Past tense. That word felt, it did something to the room. Because everyone in that press conference understood what it meant. Alex kept talking, her voice steady but fragile in the way that voices get when someone is saying something they have been holding inside for a very long time. She said that somewhere along the way, without noticing it happening, she had started playing tennis for different reasons. Not for the love of the game. Not for that feeling she had when she was 4 years old and first fell in love with a racket and a ball. She started playing for the ranking. For the expectations. For the millions of people watching every match, every result, every move she made, attaching their hopes and their pride and their national identity to whether or not she won or lost a tennis match on the other side of the world. And she said, in words that made the cameras pushing closer, that in chasing all of that, she had lost something. Something quiet. Something that she had not even realized was slipping away until it was almost gone. The love. The pure, uncomplicated, beautiful love for the sport that had defined her entire life. She looked down at her hands when she said it. Just for a second. And that one small gesture told the entire room more than 100 words could have. Then she looked up, and she told them what she had decided. She was going to skip the French Open. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than before. Before, the room had gone quiet out of surprise. Now it went quiet out of wait. Because everyone in that media center understood what Roland Garros means. It is the second Grand Slam of the year. It is the cathedral of clay court tennis, A tournament built on red dirt and history, and the kind of grueling, physical, mentally exhausting tennis that separates players who are good from players who are great. It is the tournament that every clay court specialist spends the whole spring building toward. Alex had just had her best clay season. She had beaten Magdalena Freck, the world number 45. She had dominated Wang Xinyu, seeded 31st. She had pushed Elena Rybakina, the world number 2, to a scoreline that flattered the Russian more than the match deserved. Her ranking had climbed from 42 to 38 during this tournament alone. She was building something. Everyone could see it. And now she was stepping away from the biggest stage of the clay season, voluntarily, not because a doctor told her to, not because a scan came back with bad news, but because she made the choice herself. "My body needs rest," she said. "My mind needs rest. And I need to remember why I started playing this sport in the first place." There is a specific kind of courage in those words that I do not think gets talked about enough. Professional athletes are trained from childhood to push through. Push through the pain. Push through the doubt. Push through the exhaustion. Walk it off. Get back on the court. There is no room in the competitive sports machine for the concept of enough, and the idea of a 20-year-old ranked 38 in the world, at the beginning of what could be an extraordinary career, standing up in front of cameras and journalists and saying, "I need to stop, I need to rest, I need to take care of myself before I lose myself entirely," that is not weakness. That is one of the hardest things a competitive athlete can do. Because every instinct she has been trained to follow says keep going. Every voice around her says this is your moment, the ranking is moving, the results are coming, why would you stop now? And she stopped anyway. She stopped because she was honest enough with herself to know that continuing without addressing what was happening inside would have been more damaging than the missed ranking points. She stopped because she understood something that takes most people decades to learn, that you cannot perform at your best when you are running on empty, when the joy has been replaced by obligation, when showing up feels like survival instead of passion. Social media reacted the way social media always does, loudly and immediately, but this time the loudness had a different quality to it. It was not the usual noise of controversy or debate. It was something closer to recognition. Fans from the Philippines flooded every platform with messages of support, people who had been waving flags at the Foro Italico, people who had been watching her matches at 3 in the morning Manila time, people who had made Alex their person, their source of national pride, and now they were telling her that her health mattered more than any trophy ever could. The hashtag trended worldwide within hours. Other athletes spoke up. Coco Gauff, who knows better than almost anyone what it feels like to carry the weight of expectation at a young age, posted that she was proud of Alex for putting herself first, that the court would be waiting when she was ready. Naomi Osaka, who had walked her own painful and very public road through mental health struggles, called it an act of courage, and said that Alex was setting an example for every young athlete watching. Those two names matter. Those are not minor figures offering polite words of encouragement. Those are champions, Grand Slam winners, players who have stood where Alex stands and felt what she is feeling, and they chose to stand behind her publicly and loudly. Tennis journalists who cover the tour every week tried to put the decision in context. Here is a player who just had her best clay season, one columnist wrote, who just climbed 4 ranking spots at a single tournament, who just gave one of the best players on the planet a genuine fight, and she is choosing to skip Roland Garros. That is unprecedented. But then again, Alex has always done things her own way. And that is true. Since she burst onto the tour as a teenager, Alex has never quite fit the mold. She plays with an emotional intensity that you either love immediately or do not understand at all. She wears her heart on her sleeve in a sport that often rewards the emotionally detached. She has never been shy about what she represents, about the weight of carrying the hopes of 110 million Filipinos into every match she plays. She has embraced it, worn it proudly, let it fuel her. But even the strongest fuel runs out if you are burning it without ever stopping to refill. That is what May 11th, 2026 was about. It was about a young woman being honest enough to say, I am running low. I need to stop. I need to refill. Before she left the press conference, she said one more thing. She looked directly into the cameras, which meant she was looking at everyone watching at home, and she acknowledged that some people would be disappointed. She said she knew some fans had planned trips to Paris expecting to see her play. She apologized to them, genuinely, and you could hear in her voice that the apology was real, that it cost her something to say it, because disappointing the people who love you is one of the hardest things about making a decision for yourself. But then she made them a promise. She told them that when she came back, she would be better. Not just as a player. As a person. As a daughter. As a representative of the Philippines. She said the Philippine flags would fly again. She said the chants of Laban Alex would echo again. But first, she needed to heal. She needed to rest. She needed to find her way back to the little girl who fell in love with a racket at 4 years old, Because that girl is the foundation of everything, and if you lose touch with her entirely, no ranking in the world can replace what you have lost. Then she stood up, nodded to the room, and walked out. And the journalists who had heard hundreds of press conferences, who had developed the professional distance that comes from covering the same stories over and over again, sat in that room a little longer than they normally would. Because something had happened in that media center that did not happen often. Something real. No spin, no carefully managed messaging, no public relations filter between a young woman and her truth. Just a 20-year-old sitting in front of the world and saying, "This is where I am, this is what I need, and I trust you enough to tell you." That kind of honesty is rare in professional sports. That kind of honesty is rare anywhere. In the days that followed, the conversation around Alex's announcement grew deeper and more interesting. Because it touched something that extended far beyond tennis, far beyond the Philippines, far beyond sports entirely. The conversation became about what we ask of young athletes. What we expect of them. What we project onto them without ever stopping to ask if they can carry it. Alex is 20 years old. She has been competing professionally since she was a teenager. She has spent years being the symbol of something larger than herself, and that symbol was not just a tennis player, it was hope, it was national pride, it was the proof that a girl from the Philippines could walk onto the biggest courts in the world and belong there. That is a beautiful thing to be. It is also an enormous thing to carry. And the fact that she carried it as long as she did, with as much grace as she did, says everything about who she is. But the fact that she stopped and asked herself the hard questions, the fact that she was willing to admit that something had shifted inside, that the joy had gotten complicated, that the love had gotten buried under the weight of everything else, that says even more. There is a version of this story where Alex powers through. Where she gets on a plane to Paris. Where she plays Roland Garros running on fumes and obligation and the fear of letting people down. Where she loses early, or maybe wins a few rounds, and then goes home and collapses in a way that no one outside her inner circle ever sees. That version happens all the time in professional sports. Players breaking down quietly. Players suffering in silence because the culture they exist in does not have space for anything other than toughness and results. That version does not make the news. That version does not trend worldwide. It just happens over and over, to athlete after athlete, and the cycle continues. Alex chose a different version. And in doing so, she created something that will outlast this press conference, that will outlast this tournament season, that will matter to the next generation.